Global ratings agencies Moody's and Fitch have downgraded South Africa's sovereign credit rating to junk status yesterday, citing a combination of weakening fiscal position and rising government debt and the impact of COVID-19 had on the country's economy. Now, to tell us what this means, we are now joined via Zoom by Economist Dawie Roodt. Good evening, Dawie, and welcome. Rather, good morning. I keep on saying good evening. I'm always stuck in the evening. But anyway, good morning, Dawie, and welcome to the agenda. Does this come as a surprise at all?
Good morning to you. No, certainly not as a surprise. Most economists expected them to downgrade, if not now, then later on, certainly. And I don't think this is the last surprise. And it's not only for the economists that didn't come as a surprise. The financial markets also were not surprised. The financial markets hardly reacted to this. The rand is pretty stable, the capital market is pretty stable, and the current movements on the capital market and on the rand has mostly got to do with international factors. So no surprise at all.
No surprise at all, but we also have, of course, the COVID-19 element into it. Do you think that the rating agencies should have, I don't know, maybe lax the criteria that they use? Or are we saying that this is how the economy has responded and we solely look at how the economy has responded and how it has been affected? And of course, looking into some of the issues that they raise around South Africa's fiscal position.
Yeah, well, let's be honest. The South African economy was in very deep trouble even before we've even heard of a place called Wuhan. Yep. The South African economy was in a recession already. And it's also not the virus that is impacting. It is the measures that have been put in place to contain the virus that is impacting on the economy. So South Africa's lockdown was quite severe, more than most countries in the world, and the impact on the economy was much worse as well. And the result of that inevitably was for an economy not only in a recession, but in a very, very deep depression. And it became clear long before the current crisis in which we found ourselves that the fiscal accounts, for example, was completely and totally unsustainable. So a bad situation was simply being exacerbated by the lockdown. And today we are in a situation, exactly as the rating agencies have said, is that the fiscal accounts has become completely and totally unsustainable and that we are heading for a fiscal debt trap. No, it doesn't matter whether the economy, whether there has been a virus or a lockdown or not. The reality is it will become more and more difficult for South Africa to repay its debt over time. And that's simply what the rating agencies are saying. Their job is to tell investors whether it's safe to invest in South Africa or not and how risky it is. And without a doubt, has become significantly more risky the last couple of years.
Do you then think that these two downgrades then also lay the foundation for those who are arguing to say that there's no way that South Africa can afford to go to another hard lockdown? Looking, for instance, at the number of coronavirus cases at the moment, the numbers have now skyrocketed, daily number of cases now at over 3,000. And some people speaking, of course, about the second wave. That if you look at these, at the analysis that comes from these two rating agencies, that now you can argue that we can't afford to go into a hard lockdown.
Exactly. That is the point. It doesn't mean that we have to start getting irresponsible. We still need to be responsible. We still have to protect people that are particularly vulnerable for this virus. But without a doubt, the economy is suffering because of this lockdown, and a further lockdown will simply exacerbate the very difficult situation as it is. So yes, I guess that is the point that is being made. And also keep in mind that remember, the biggest killer out there is not the virus, it's not cancer, it's not TB or anything like that. The biggest killer out there is actually poverty. And according to my calculation, more people will die because of an increase in poverty than people that will die potentially from this virus. So yes, now your point is absolutely well made, and that is we simply cannot afford another lockdown. We need to be responsible, but the further lockdown will put an economy that's already suffering, even in a more difficult situation, which will lead to even more further increase in poverty and unemployment, and that actually will affect people's livelihoods as well.
And now looking at our debt levels, we are in the red zone, no matter how we try to put it. And it would seem as though that government still has the appetite even to still go and borrow money.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're absolutely right. The fiscal debt levels have become completely unsustainable. Based on my calculations, fiscal debt, and that is only the national government debt, will be around about 85% of GDP in the current financial year. In the meantime, we have state-owned enterprises like Eskom and South African Airways also becoming completely unsustainable financially. And we've given another more than 10 billion rand to South African Airways. Something like I just cannot understand. I cannot fathom this. We are in a very, very deep fiscal debt trap as it is, and we keep on wasting money. So hopefully our political leaders will turn this around and make a change to economic policies, and hopefully this downgrade will bring the point home that we cannot afford to waste money like this. In fact, what we need to do, we have to cut back on state spending, which has become, because of the debt, which has become totally unsustainable. So a weak economy leads to less tax revenue, and if you keep on spending under these circumstances, then the debt will keep on going up until we reach a level where we are now, leading to downgrades and leading to all other bad things going with that as well.
So remember that the Deputy Finance Minister earlier on this year, when they were announcing plans around the recovery plan of the country as well, and looking into the impact of COVID-19, he spoke about a hippopotamus, and I wonder, how do we close the mouth of that hippopotamus?
Yeah, or the crocodile. Well, there are two ways of closing the mouth of the crocodile. And when you refer to the mouth of the crocodile, it is state spending that's been going up, while state revenue taxes that's been coming down. And the gap between these two is referred to as the fiscal deficit. And that's the amount of money that the Minister of Finance needs to borrow. We cannot keep on borrowing like this because our debt is too much. And that's the reason why we got a downgrade. So what can we do? We can increase taxes, which is not going to work because the taxpayer is already overburdened. The other alternative is to cut on state spending, which is politically very difficult to do because that means that we have to spend less money on people. Civil servants, for example, need to take a pay cut, which is very difficult to do. So the actual problem in South Africa is not actually economical, or it's not actually financial of nature. The actual problem in South Africa is political, because we know the tripartite alliance in South Africa, consisting of, amongst others, COSATU and, of course, the ANC. And COSATU will not allow their members to take a pay cut. And that's the problem. That's the dilemma in which we find ourselves today. We need to cut on state spending, which inevitably means spend less money on people, but politically, that is nearly impossible.
Do you think at all, Dawie, looking at the wage bill, that government would be able to come up with a formula that says that this is our investment into salaries? If our investment into salaries, for instance, is, let's say, 42% of the budget, what is it that we get out of it? So is there return on investment? And if there's no return on investment, that is what we can then use to cut the fat.
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. And I actually hope that journalists will ask this kind of question more. Now, many economists, we've done the calculations, and we can actually tell you. A very good example is, for example, education. The biggest expense item for the Minister of Finance is education. We spend more on education in absolute and in relative terms than most other countries in the world. So money is not the issue when it comes to education. So if we compare the outcome of education in South Africa to other countries in the world, it is not only bad, it is sometimes the worst in the world. So clearly, the investment of the taxpayer in education in South Africa is not giving the required results. And there are many other examples. Health services is a very good example. The many other expense items of the Minister of Finance, housing is an example. There are many other examples where it's very, very clear that the amounts of money that is being spent on these various items is not well spent. And that's one or two things must happen. Either this money must be better utilized, or we have to spend less. Because as it stands at the moment, money of the taxpayers is simply wasted on things like, for example, education, because of the bad outcome of education.
And you know, normally, Dawie, when we look at what ratings agencies say about the state of an economy, we always speak about in terms of what this would mean for the state in terms of trying to go and borrow outside. But there's also another conversation to be had here, and this is in relation to investor confidence. And we've had the investor summit that has taken place. But what is it that investors would be looking into and say that on the basis of what these two credit ratings agencies have said, this probably might not be a perfect environment or economic environment to be investing money in?
Yeah, absolutely, and you're absolutely correct. So it's good to have an investment summit like what we've just had. It's good to try to get foreigners and local investors to invest in the economy. But the reality is that the rating agencies are telling us it's not a good place to invest. And perhaps we should, instead of trying to get people to invest in a country, what we should be doing is to just try to create an environment which make it friendly and attractive to investment in. Now, let me give you an example. Is 3/4 of the local authorities are financially mismanaged. Now, and that's the most important first connection of a business person. So how does it make sense if you try to get investors to come to the country, but they can't really get the necessary services from the local authorities? We don't have electricity or sufficient electricity, water is an issue, sanitation is an issue, potholes is an issue. So before we're trying to get foreigners to invest here, maybe the state should start doing what they're supposed to be doing and start doing that much better. And investors will follow naturally. Because investors do want a good return, but under these kind of circumstances, it's extremely difficult to do business in South Africa because of the factors that I've mentioned. Fix that, and investments won't be a problem.
Geez, Dawie, I feel like you and I have had the same cup of coffee this morning because we're in agreement a lot here. and you speak about local authority, and what you find even with our political system says that the most talented people would go to national, whereas the most talented people should actually be right there at the local government level, where actually this is the cold face of service delivery. This is where companies set up, and this is where companies expect the water to be flowing. This is where companies expect that there would be electricity supply.
Exactly. The local authorities is the first contact point for business. The local authorities must function properly. They don't. Fix that. That's the first thing that we need to fix. And of course, many other things. Another thing that that we need to fix, and we owe this to our poor people especially, is the quality of education. But local authorities, you want to get this economy going, fix local authorities, and it will happen.
Okay, and let's just quickly touch on S&P. Why do you think that S&P has decided to keep a stable outlook?
Well, there's different rating levels for the major rating agencies. They've already given us a downgrade. S&P, Standard & Poor's, is usually a little bit more strict than some of the other ones. Moody's, for example, is a little bit more forgiving quite often. And they've already downgraded South Africa, Standard & Poor's. But, there are only two important ratings. The one is, are you considered to be investment rating, or are you considered to be so-called junk bonds or speculative rating? And based on the three major rating agencies, we are currently junk bonds in all three cases, and that is bad. It doesn't matter whether you're junk or more junk or junker, we are junk. Of course, it matters the various levels of being junk, but we are junk. Let's work on that, let's stabilize that, and let's see if we can get an investment rating back again. But unfortunately, I'm afraid that is probably going to take us a very long time.
Dawie Roodt, thank you so much for your time. That is Economist Dawie Roodt. Let's move over to this story.